Okay. I think for me, in terms of the struggle and what motivated me, goes back a long way to my childhood. Because when I was growing up, I grew up in the Catholic Church. I was baptized at the age of about 7, 8 when I was in class 3. And I think one of what we were being taught is caring for the vulnerable. And so from then onward to my secondary, which I attended Ngandu Girls High School, I was involved in the concern and care for the vulnerable groups, being a member of Catholic Action at the Ngandu Girls, and where we could go even to areas far from the central province, where we'd go to assist the vulnerable groups. And so I think my passion was to change lives, so make a difference in people's lives. Then beyond there, I think when I went for my university studies, I did study. I'm a sociocultural anthropologist by academic qualifications, and I also did social justice. And so all these expose you to addressing the concerns of the less vulnerable or less fortunate in the society. And I think as a sociocultural anthropologist, some of the areas that we used to cover was the issue of agents of change. And so when you are concerned about those who are less vulnerable, those who are less fortunate, you also have that passion, that desire to bring change. And so I think now through that process, I think I became more concerned and more interested on how I could be an agent of change in my own society. And maybe if I earned, in terms of getting involved with the women, having been brought up closely by my mother, I knew the person I was. It was a lot of reflection of my mother's efforts. My mother, Grace Wambui Kanyi, who used to be a small-scale farmer. And I knew, like, when I was going to school, I never stayed at home because of lack of school fees, because of lack of uniform. She was very hardworking, and even she could better go for kibarua, casual labor, to ensure that school fees was there. I had the uniform, I had everything that I needed. So I think now joining and coming into the women's movement and associating with the struggle for women's empowerment, to me it made a lot of sense. And because I could look at the image of my own mother and see that if every woman is empowered, their children are not going to stay away from school. Their children are not going to have health problems so long as the mother is empowered. And so I think that very close relationship and that a lot of support from my mother, I think I used to see the image of a mother in the image of my own mother. So in the struggle, I was convinced that the way forward in promoting democracy in this country is by promoting the women. Because if the woman is empowered, then the children will go to school, the children will get health care services wherever they need it, and so there was need for great focus in empowering the woman. Yes.
What role did you play in the affirmative action, especially in the political parties?
Okay, I think when I joined the women's movement, this was in the late 90s, when I started working as a program officer at the Collaborative Center for Gender and Development. I found the organization pushing for the affirmative action, the affirmative action legislative framework. That is where we were trying to have the affirmative action and changed into law or legislation. And so as a staff of the Collaborative Center and working under, by then, Dr. Wanjiku Kabira, then we had a lot of focus in promoting the affirmative action. Now, when it came to dealing with the affirmative action in the political parties, I think my academic background and skills, and also in addition, I had also undergone a gender training early on by the Collaborative Center for Gender and Development, so equipped with the skills for gender analysis and also now the academic background, I was able to do a lot of the technical work in terms of gender analysis of the political parties, legislations or policies. And this included the political parties' constitutions and the political parties' manifestos. And the issue was to identify whether these parties were promoting women's participation in the political parties, and then to come up with recommendations that how could these parties promote women's participation in their respective parties. And by then we were dealing with all the political parties because we have women in all the political parties. And then we would use the findings, either one, to lobby the political party to entrench the affirmative action in its policy documents, which now included the manifesto or the constitution, based on on what we have found in terms of the gender analysis. If the party already had affirmative action, then we would use the information to lobby it to implement the profession for the affirmative action. So, and so we would use that information for lobbying and advocacy. I was highly involved, working together in collaboration with the other women, Professor Wanjiku Kabira, people like Honorable Julia Ujambo, Deborah Ukumu, and many others, because it was women working together. But then we would be equipped with the information. So we would say it was like a research-based, because you have the evidence with which you are going to lobby those political parties, either to adopt the affirmative action or either to implement what it is that they have in their respective parties.
Which other strategies did you use other than the gender analysis, then lobbying and advocacy? Are there other strategies that you used to ensure affirmative action was adopted by political parties?
Predominantly, those were the key strategies now with the political parties. So we would use the evidence-based, we have the information and that is the information. So you are going to target specific parties. So it would not be general, but it would be specific per each political party. Yes, and then we used to have a team of women lobbyists. So the women lobbyists would be guided by the information that we have in terms of meeting the parties. And then again, when it came to lobbying, we would use a key woman who is, if you are in this particular party, then you would mobilize for us the leadership, because the people whom we were targeting for lobbying were the leaders of the political parties. So the woman would link us and mobilize the leaders for us. Then we would go and meet with so now the meeting with these leaders would be the lobbying itself. Yes.
What can you say are some of the key achievements that you managed to achieve within that particular process?
I think the key achievements is that the issue of gender and women's participation in the political parties now became almost like every party became aware. And they were very conscious that the women were watching, in the sense that we had managed to raise such a high awareness within the political parties. So whatever the parties would be doing, they would be conscious that, we have the issue of the women. And I think creating that level of awareness also made them sensitive that if they are for example, maybe nominations by the political parties, then they would be nominating the women. They are aware that women have not been elected through the first past the post direct elections, so we have to nominate the women. So the raising of the awareness was one of the greatest achievements. And also, when you look at the party manifestos and the political party constitutions, most of them were able to incorporate the affirmative action in their respective policy documents. And to us, I think that was a great achievements within the political parties.
What can you say are some of the lessons that you learned, maybe that you can draw on within your experiences?
I think what I learned is one, I would say unity is strength. And what I mean by that is that as women, it was important for the women to work together, regardless of the party affiliation, regardless of the ethnic affiliation, because when we talk about women's political party participation, for example, today we have the mainstream political party institutions. We have the ODM, we have the Ford, we have Jubilee, we have Wiper, all these political parties, we have women in these political parties. And so I think one of the greatest lessons is that regardless of which political party you are affiliated with, you are a woman. And so when it comes to opening up space with the political parties, one, women must remain united, because we need women in all these political parties. So I think it is to go beyond the divisions that we have as a society and to focus on the women's agenda. Because then when we focus together, those women in the ODM will push for women's issues in the ODM. Those in Jubilee will do the same. Those in Wiper will do the same. Those in PNU. So it doesn't matter in which party you are. It is women's issue in whichever party you are. And then in addition to that, I think the importance of having women equipped with the skills. We have the, like now, the technical skills, even to identify those issues and also to have evidence in what you are going to lobby with, so that you are informed with the issues that you are going to lobby for. And then I think another important aspect when it came to lobbying is the issue of, again, women remaining united, because then united we win, but when we are divided, then we fall. And then there is need of having these skills in terms of both in terms of the technical analysis and all that, and also the lobbying and advocacy, in the sense that it is not just, and I just wanted to use an example of our two main coalitions today. If women wanted to go to lobby, like Honorable our former Prime Minister, Raila Odinga, it is not just a woman who will pick a phone and call him. So you need a woman who has certain closeness with the Honorable to even make the appointment for the women to go to meet him. If women are going to the President of the Republic, that is Uhuru Kenyatta. Again, not every woman who will pick the phone, but we have to look for the right woman who have that rapport with the team that you are going to meet. And I think that was a great lesson, I would say, that I learned. Yes.
And what kind of opportunities do you see maybe that you can use to move the agenda forward?
In the political parties.
Yes.
I think today we have very many opportunities, and I would say one, if it is the constitution, it is very clear in terms of the women's representation in all institutions, including the political parties. Article 81 of the constitution is very clear on that the electoral body should ensure or put in place mechanisms on how the political institutions are going to ensure the representation and compliance with Article 27(8) on the affirmative action, which we say the not more than 2/3 gender rule. So that is the greatest opportunity in terms of now the affirmative action in all public institutions being entrenched in the Constitution. So I think that is the greatest opportunity that women today can seize. And now focusing on that, push for women's representation in parliament, in the political parties, and in all other institutions of decision making. I think that is one of the greatest opportunity. And then I think as a society, we are also changing. And the society today, I think it is not as it was before. The cultural barriers that kept women off, I think we are gradually shedding them off in the sense that the society is changing. And I think the women can take the opportunity of that, the readiness of the society to change, to use that opportunity. And even more that now we have more women, in terms of the education, we have more women who are educated in terms of the academic education. So I think what we need is the women to mobilize again this, I would call them the potential that we have within amongst the women, and not allow ourselves to be divided, but we become focused. And I think we have a lot of opportunities. We have more women in leadership today that we had in the past. So the question is, how do these women who are now holding positions of leadership work together with the women to forge or to push forward the gender agenda forward? I think that is the greatest opportunity, but the women themselves must, have that consciousness to push together as women and in the interest of women's agenda. And at all levels, at the national down to the grassroots.
And what can you say about these particular opportunities about the political parties act in terms of ensuring that women are represented as well as the Constitution? Why is it that you still do not have those rules and structures respected within the political parties? What is the problem?
I think what I would say, and this is my opinion, is that when it comes to these issues, women struggled to put those issues even in those policies, if I call the Constitution or the Political Parties Act, etc. But in as much as they are there, the question is, are even women looking like how we use it to hold the political parties accountable? You have the affirmative action, are you implementing? So I think where we need, as women, Kenyan women, is also to hold those institutions accountable. So if it is a political party, and we are the women in that political party, and women must join these political parties. The question is, are you holding your political party accountable for its commitment to women, which is reflected in the party policy documents? That is the manifesto and the constitution of the party, and also including now the Kenyan constitution. The question is, actually, is the constitutional affirmative action being implemented in all structures and institutions? And I think it is the obligation, because those things, for me, I believe they don't come on a silver platter. It is for the women to struggle and push to ensure that and hold the institutions accountable. Are you implementing what is in your party constitution or policy documents? Is the government implementing, or even the electoral body, that is IIEBC, is it implementing what is there in the constitution, or it is required to implement to ensure compliance with the constitution? Yes. Okay.
So, Madam Wambui,
yes.
What final recommendations would you make to the women of Kenya as we move forward to the next level?
I think as we move forward, the Kenyan women, again, we must get focused on our agenda as women. We forge that united movement and strengthen. The movement is still there. Women are still pushing in their different corners, but I think what we need is that united agenda, which is bringing women together to push for the women's agenda. Now together as all women, regardless of which background or where you are working or what you are doing as women, because I think the achievements so far, it is because women worked together from the grassroots to the national level. Politicians, academicians, women in the civil society, we all worked together. And I think now for us to realize those benefits that have been so far realized in terms of paper, because it is not so much in terms of implementation. Women have to work together. And I think as women, we need to, what I would call, let us not become segregated that, these are women in the civil society, these are women in parliament, these are women grassroots. I think if it was not women united, with a common agenda, we would not be where we are. And so what I would say is that women, we need to come back together, have a common agenda which we are all pushing for, particularly when it comes to the issues of gender equality and women's empowerment, which we are still quite far from realizing. Because when I go down to the grassroots, I think I look at the women there and where they are, many of them don't even know what gains have been made. And to us, I think we can only celebrate when every woman in this country, the woman at the grassroots, the woman at the national level, have been empowered. And I think now to make it round to where I started, my participation or my getting involved in the struggle for empowerment is because of the realization that we have these vulnerable women, and we have to empower them to get them from that level of vulnerability to a level of empowerment. And empowerment to me, because we keep saying when we train about gender, we talk about practical and strategic gender needs. I think we need to strategize for both. There are those who are at that level where they require the practical gender needs, but we have to move them from that level to strategic gender needs, whereby we are able to focus on how do we empower them, how do we change the power relations at all levels of the society, so that we are able to create a society where men and women at all levels are able to exploit their potential to the full and contribute to the betterness or the betterment of the entire society. So I think as women, and we need to also join hands even with the men who join us in the struggle, because it is the empowerment of the entire society.
The women's movement is really disintegrated into professionals, academicians also being in the professionals, the NGOs, and the grassroots. How do you bring in these women together? Because initially when there was one women movement, there were fewer women. How do you bring in these women together?
Now that is an agenda. Now for the women's organizations, I think for me, I worked with the different organizations. I worked with the Collaborative Center as a programs and administration manager. I worked with the Women Political Alliance as an executive director. And to me, I think the time that the women's organizations actually hold a lot of that power, of bringing the women together, and also even trying to come up with a common agenda. Because when each organization pursues its own agenda, then we are not able to come together. And so I think as the organizations, there is need to pull together. We pull together to come together and strategize. Then you go your own way to push what we have, what is our common agenda. And I think that was how, even in terms of the affirmative action, that is how we were able to win the achievements that are there today, because it was now the women having a common agenda. So I think as women, you still look, and I think, yes, we have made a lot of progress. We are not where we started, and we need to build on that, because a lot of it today is in the paper. Because if I was to go grassroots and I ask the women if they have seen the changes, many of them may not have seen it. But we have women who, like now, are in decision making, and actually they are doing perfect in terms of their contribution to their respective communities. But we are not yet where we want to be, because we don't want these goodies or the achievements to be in paper. We want it to be realized. We don't want mothers with the babies dying because of curable diseases, because the mother cannot afford to pay the hospital. We don't want a girl child being married early because she could not be educated. There was no school fees. We don't want, women, they are being so vulnerable because you are so disempowered. So what we want is to bring that change. And I think that is the only time, as I said, as a whole society, we shall be liberated, and we shall realize what we call sustainable development. Because the empowered woman will have a lot of contribution in terms of the development from the family level. So we change from the family level all the way to the national level, from the grassroots to the national level. That is when then we shall have women empowered, and I think as women we shall have realized what we fought for so long.
Last word. What is your last word?
My last word, I think it is just to call upon the Kenyan women that we need to come together, join hands together, regardless, let us, our diversity as women, and our diversity are many. We have the women in the academia, we have the women politicians, we have the women in the civil society, we have the women at the grassroots. We have women in the different political parties, and we have women in the different ethnic groups. Let us use our diversity as our strength to enable us to fight a common front, whereby we are able to use these diversities to push for the change that is going to lead to women's empowerment and the betterment of our society as a whole. Thank you.